welcome to take 2 of our final Halloween episode of Hollywood Kitchen. I really enjoy mixing the famous and ultra iconic stars like, say, Joan Crawford with the more rare and obscure on Hollywood Kitchen. So today we will talk about Joan, but we're also going to talk about Leila Hyams. Am I pronouncing that right?
I don't know. I'm not good with pronouncing names.
I'm not either. We're Southern. But anyway,
Yeah.
so basically, we're going to talk about her life, her career, her food, her coffee, and it's going to be a fun discussion. So with me is my friend and frequent collaborator, Angie Schneider, curator of this beautiful Hollywood Heritage Museum, and Dominique Benedict making her Hollywood Kitchen debut. And hi. And Dominique runs a company called Hollywood Blends or Breakfast at Dominique's. And tell us about what you do and your company.
So we are a legacy preservation project, pretty much. I like the idea of getting the old Hollywood icons back into homes, especially the homes of the upcoming younger generations, and really getting people interested in the people who found success before social media. So when available, we work with the families, estates, or foundations of different icons throughout history. And for somebody like Miss Hyams here, she doesn't have any living family, so we worked with a historian.
Unknown caller. Sorry about that. This episode has just got some stuff going on.
We worked with a historian and made sure to label it a tribute since there's no actual official family to work with on her. But we dug up all the fun like recipes and stories about her to really make sure we created something that authentically told the story of who she was beyond the films. She was super interesting, so we just took a special interest in her because she's a lesser known icon, and we thought it might be fun to teach even people who are into old Hollywood about somebody they might not recognize.
Exactly. And Angie, for those watching who might not know anything about Leila Hyams, and that is very possible, tell us about who she was and why she's important.
Well, yeah, I think she was very important, especially with some of these, early iconic movies. My first, experience with her was in the movie Freaks, and actually Freaks was kind of my gateway movie into kind of that horror genre, or it just more the suspense type of, I don't know if I would even call that a horror, as much as just a very suspenseful film. But then she did like The 13 Chair, she did Dancing Daughter. It's like all these movies. And she was just a beautiful woman. And, I always kind of put her in the same boat as Vilma Binky in a sense that they had the name, they had the stardom, but they were able to just leave it all. They married well, they got into things like real estate. Leila Hyams went on and became basically an amateur archaeologist and traveled the world and worked with big institutions like UCLA and,
Wow.
dug up these artifacts and antiques. Like, it's so fascinating to have such a glamorous career in Hollywood and then just still to be able to walk away from that and have a normal, happy life.
I'm actually very fascinated by what I call like the second chapter in a lot of these people's lives
Yeah.
because it tends to fall into a couple of categories. First off, you've got the people that their career ended for whatever the reason, and they turned to drugs and alcohol and just went completely downhill in every way, and many died young. Then you've got people who clung to that stardom with everything they had right until the bitter end, kind of like Betty Davis. And as much as I love her, and I do, it always kind of breaks my heart when you see how sick, how frail, still chain smoking on Johnny Carson. It's like, oh God. And you kind of wonder if that maybe prolonged her life and kept her going, or if you think maybe this is all that she had. That's kind of what I almost tend to think as well. And then you have people that could go, I'm done, peace out. I've got a million other hobbies, interests, things I want to do with my life. And then they do, like how Gloria Swanson became a sculptress. And she also had a fashion design line or a fashion line. And then Layla became an archaeologist, and how some of these people just found really exciting, fascinating second acts in their life. And I kind of think that's really an interesting topic to kind of look into.
Well, and just the people that Layla worked with. I mean, the fact that she was one of Tom, Todd Browning's, starlets that he put in a few movies. I mean, she worked with see everybody. I mean, just these names that you could think of that she worked with. It's just fascinating.
Jean Harlow.
Jean Harlow. Yeah, she was in Redheaded
Yeah.
Woman with Jean Harlow. And she was never the huge megastar
Right.
like Harlow, but she was a steadily working actress. Now, Dominique, she was born into vaudeville, correct?
Yes. She grew up, there's a quote somewhere, and I don't know if it's fully true, but apparently her what do babies sleep in? Is it a crib? A crib. Okay. Instead of a crib,
cradle,
yeah, whatever. She I'm not into babies, if you can't tell. But instead of a crib, she slept in it, grew up sleeping in a suitcase, and that she's never had stability. And I kind of think that's why she chose to leave Hollywood behind, to have once she realized she could test out the waters on stability, and really just enjoy a normal
marriage.
yeah, a normal
home.
life, probably a calmer life.
Yeah.
And even though you're still digging up artifacts and
Right.
doing
Traveling on
crazy
your yachts and
stuff.
stuff,
Yeah,
yeah.
traveling on your yacht, but just not a life in front of cameras like you grew up behind. I kind of think that's why she really was able to walk away from Hollywood, just kind of seeking out something calmer.
Well, also, to the outsider, you'd think, oh, you're born to vaudeville. Your parents are in vaudeville. How fun and exciting. But the truth is, that was a pretty brutal way of life. I mean, you are traveling nonstop. You're probably sleeping in train stations, train cars, boarding houses, unless you're like really at the top of the echelon, and nonstop hard work performing. And there's no leisure time. There's no it's probably not a fraction as glamorous as it would sound to the outsider. And it seems that like a lot of old Hollywood stars were born into that, like Joan Blondell, Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney, Buster Keaton. They did not choose this. This chose them.
Well, her parents, I mean, they weren't just vaudeville. Like her mom was a stage star. They had their own troupe. What was it, Hyams and McIntyre? Yeah, so they actually had their own troupe that, so you were the people, so you were having to be the top of the bill, and I'm sure even her parents had that stress in them that they passed on to her.
Constant exhaustion.
Yeah. And there's some people like, say, Judy Garland, that was all she knew, and that was all she would ever know, honestly.
Right.
But someone like Leila, I think she kind of had that ability to walk away and say, I want something else. I choose a different life. So, and I definitely think she counts as a horror star for Hollywood Kitchen, because
Absolutely.
she was in Freaks, Island of Lost Souls, and 13th Chair, which I think all of those movies completely qualify her for
Absolutely.
this.
I think so.
So, we'll talk about the recipe. So we found the recipe in Photo Play, and there is an article about getting your bridge game off to a flying start, which we don't have group bridge games at people's houses anymore. That might need to make a comeback, darn it. That's such a fun idea. Maybe. Anyways, so this did not get the bridge game off to a flying start, however. Angie, talk about the recipe and kind of what went down.
Well, and I'm a pretty good baker, but no.
Yeah, you are.
But when I read the article, like first thing, I knew it was going to be a fail. I mean, it really was very lackluster. It was a lot of flour, only 2 tablespoons of sugar, no butter. Probably the only sweetness you were going to get is you had to use dates, but even then it wasn't enough sweetness to overpower it. But, and it asked for cream, but I'm like, I use buttermilk just to try to give it that extra fluff. But yeah, and then plus only 1 egg, like with all that flour, because she used 2 different kinds of flour. So it was just your regular pastry flour, and then graham flour, which is basically just like more of a wheat flour, and 1 egg. So I'm just like, I know this is gonna fail, and it did. And probably back then too, these weren't like what we envisioned muffins today, like when you get your nice blueberry muffins things, this was stuff that was probably just used for dipping. And I even think in that article, it was supposed to accompany like a soup or something. So I don't think they wanted these very sweet and very, decadent, because it was more meant to just absorb another flavor, another thing. So I guess you kind of have to take that into consideration too, but.
Okay. I'm going to show the camera what these look like.
Without the butter or anything, they're just not very pretty. They're just, maybe you'll dip it in your soup or something. That's
In the
about it.
interest of being a completist, though, I do think we should all maybe take a little taste of the muffin. So you guys want to each?
Very bland.
Okay. All right, guys. To Leila Hyams. Very bland.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's our flour.
Yeah. So
No.
all flour.
What?
But I was committed. Doing it the way it said.
That's right. That's right. Hang on. I'm just gonna take a minute.
Yeah, it needs like a soup or it's a dipping muffin.
Yeah, very much. Interestingly though,
As soon as I pulled out of the oven, I just took one little bite with Chris. I'm like, no. He's like, they can't be that bad. I'm like, no, they're bad.
well, what happened is my friend Darren Barnes, who also helps curate at the barn here, he and I last week we went down to Knott's Berry Farm because I'm kind of obsessed with their fried chicken and rhubarb. And we had a dinner together, and I wound up getting a bunch of cans of boysenberries to bring home. And I love finding a zillion ways I can use boysenberry juice and boysenberries in cooking. So I thought, I'm going to whip up some muffins. So this is our third muffin recipe on Hollywood Kitchen because last Christmas, Angie did Jack Oakey's muffins. That was a pretty good muffin. I think it needed fruit or something in it. But other than that, it's pretty solid.
Like bland back then.
Pretty bland. Yeah. But I made a long time ago, I forget when, I made Anne Blythe's muffin recipe. And this was from a 1950s cookbook. So not 20s or 30s, but 50s. And so I thought, I'm going to take this boysenberry juice and these boysenberries, and I'll just make the Anne Blythe blueberry muffin recipe and substitute boysenberries. So that's what I did. And I think that when they were fresh out of the oven, oh my God, they were delicious. And my whole apartment smelled like warm boysenberry. They've been in my fridge for about a day and a half. So maybe a little bit dry, but this is an Anne Blythe boysenberry muffin if you guys would like to try.
Yeah, I just think muffins had two different purposes early on. I think, in the 20s and 30s, I think muffins were just meant to dip and to use as a scooping type of mechanism versus then you get to the 50s and later it becomes a dessert.
The cupcake era.
It becomes the sweetness. Blueberries, it could stand on its own. I think back then muffins weren't meant to stand on their own. They were meant to accompany something.
That makes perfect sense. The inside of these, by the way, is kind of purple because I put a lot of boysenberry juice in it. But I think they turned out pretty decently.
Much better than.
But again, different recipe. So.
Yeah.
It takes me a minute to process the muffin, excuse me.
So why Leila Hyams, like when you're going through and
So one of our collaborators who helped me with the Joan Crawford coffee, his name is Gary Sweeney. He's obsessed with Leila Hyams. He wanted to do a biography on her, just life got busy.
Yeah.
So we thought it would be a fun vehicle to sort of still help get Lila's name out there without doing a full-blown book. And we tracked down a couple of her recipes because she did really like to bake. And we chose a chocolate and vanilla kind of swirl to kind of represent both ends of the baking. You're always going to do either something chocolatey or vanilla. And we just thought it would be really fun to kind of give like a brief timeline of her life. We have her baby photo on the back, one of her 1920s portraits, and then we've got, of course, the gorgeous photo of her when she was 18.
We show this to the camera.
Bag. And we thought she was interesting. She's somebody that not many people know about, and I like picking the lesser known women. I really like focusing heavily on women when I choose my icons, just because they're underrepresented, and everybody really worships the men, whereas the women just kind of fall to the wayside in history a lot. And I not a big fan of that method of teaching history. I think the women did a lot more and worked a lot harder to get the success that they had.
Agreed.
So I really highlight women. And the men that we do highlight are just the most upstanding gentlemen to kind of balance this out, because if I'm gonna highlight men throughout history, they gotta be like good people.
And I love the alternating, but again, between the super iconic and the lesser known, because I think to me, the lesser known people are every bit as interesting. The world just doesn't know as much about them.
Right.
You know, in preparation for this episode the other night, Close Up and I watched, sat on the couch and we watched Island of Lost Souls again. That movie is so disturbing. I hadn't seen it in ages, so I felt like I was coming to it almost as a blank slate because it's been so long.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I was sitting there like, holy crap. I mean, because basically it's the Island of Dr. Moreau story, and he's experimenting on animals, on people, doing these mating. I mean, it's some sick stuff. Like, and this was like 1932, so very pre-code.
Yeah.
Because Charles Lawton, I can't pronounce stuff either, who basically steals this movie kind of from everybody. He says there's a line he has in it, like, I am playing God or something to that effect. So I can see how this movie was heavily censored. I think it was even banned in England. So
a lot of those mad scientist movies, from Frankenstein to Invisible Man to Island of Lost Souls. It's just
they're trying to give you ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very
much.
Yeah, it's very much a thing. And also, Bela Lugosi is in it, and he's unrecognizable almost, except for his voice, because he plays one of the animals that is the Dr. Moreau experiment, and he's got all the he almost looks like a werewolf monkey combination with the Hungarian accent. But she's beautiful in it. She plays like the female lead, and other than look scared or terrified, I mean, she doesn't have that much to do in the film. But I mean, to me, if you're in a classic like that, it kind of helps boost your recognition in terms of, you know, people knowing who you are. And kind of the same thing with Freaks. Did she make 2 films with Todd Browning?
The 13th Chair was also Todd Browning as well.
Okay. And I haven't seen that one in ages. I need to rewatch that. But Freaks also is one of the great horror classics.
I love that film. I like that they I don't like that they did it featuring the freaks in a negative connotation, but I liked that they
went at the end.
They showcase the people who aren't as recognized.
Right.
I loved it. And I really loved that she was the accepting, graceful, just like loved everybody part in that film. So I just think she's a charming little lady.
She's kind of the opposite of the Olga Baklanova character, because Olga Baklanova is like the evil, plotting, scheming blonde in Freaks, and Leila Hyams is the caring, except they're kind of like total polar ends of the spectrum. And I think that's such an interesting movie. I've probably seen it like 20 times at least, but it's just a fascinating film. And for the golden age of Hollywood, it's kind of a miracle that film got greenlit, especially at MGM, which was known for its extreme glamour.
And most people don't realize, but it wasn't supposed to be her in that role. It was probably supposed to be Jean Harlow.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, Jean. There's actually a contract out there of Jean Harlow.
Really?
Yeah, that she was signed. She had signed for Freaks. We're just all it said was an actor. It could have been Leela. It could have been Olga. You know, it's one of those two. Would have been Jean Harlow. And you know, I think once Todd Browning started pushing the button, we still don't know why Harlow didn't go into that role. But was it maybe MGM, Louis B. Mayer being like, no, we're not putting my beauties, my top stars, because Todd Browning did kind of get a lot of trouble and flack after Freaks, and a lot of people lost respect for him after that movie. And you know, so it did make a big change in his career too, as much for everybody else.
But I'm happy he did it.
I
mean, I like that he actually used people, like the genuine people. He didn't just hire somebody to pretend to be abnormal.
Yeah. And he still tried to put them in a good light, that these are good-hearted people.
Yeah.
And they were just there trying to make a living and a career, and they kind of
life.
It's a great example of acceptance.
Exactly.
Well, and two, if you lived back in that time and you had a situation like the people in that film had, what were you gonna do?
Right.
You gotta eat, you gotta survive, put a roof over your head. I mean, for them, the sideshow was probably the best and possibly only way that they
Absolutely.
had to work.
Get 3 meals a day and get
Yeah.
a roof over your
Because
head.
I think a lot of us, you just do the best you can with what you
Yeah.
have got.
And the degradation you have to go through being a sideshow
Mhm.
star as somebody who was just born that way, it's not,
Yeah.
it wouldn't happen today for
Yeah.
sure. But
But I want to do a special shout out of memory to my friend David Scall. He was an incredible film historian. They say don't meet your heroes, but I got to meet David and even be a friend. And God, I miss him. I don't want to start crying, but I miss him. David was unfortunately died in a car accident January 1st, but he was on 5 episodes of Hollywood Kitchen with me, and he's the Todd Browning biographer. And he basically is the definitive final word on all things Todd Browning. And his book, Dark Carnival, is an absolute must read. And they're even reissuing it posthumously. So you can buy a copy of that book. And it's just a phenomenal book because Todd Browning grew up in the world of science. Like that was his whole background. So for him, that was his normal.
yeah.
Like, you know, and he made so many films that were set in that world because that's the world that he knew.
Yeah.
I
It
think
probably opened the doors for movies like Nightmare Alley and some of these others.
Absolutely.
That, you know, it is okay to kind of push that button a little bit and shed the right kind of light on those people.
Absolutely.
and it's so interesting to me how some films they can get buried or even banned when they come out, and then decades, even generations later, they're rediscovered and hailed as this classic. Like last year on Halloween, which is my birthday, I went to the New Beverly and they showed Freaks, and it was a sold out audience, you know. And every time I have experiences like that, I like to hope wherever Todd Browning is, I hope that he knew
Right.
there was a sold out crowd of people just cheering and going nuts for that movie because the love, you know, I mean, that movie, I just recently got the box set of Todd Browning, which has The Unknown, The Mystic, Freaks, David Scall doing commentary. And it's a really excellent box set. So I highly, highly recommend that. And with talking about Todd Browning, of course, roads are going to lead in one direction, and that's to Joan Crawford and the unknown. So let's talk about that, ladies, because we have an event tomorrow at the Hollywood Heritage Museum.
We're Spring the Unknown, and we're going to have Joan Crawford's grandson Casey showing some home movies thanks to Dominique, and coordinated all that for us tomorrow.
He's coming out generously to screen the home films and ask or answer any questions and just kind of share about his JoJo with everybody. His JoJo was the word for grandma that Joan preferred. She did not like grandma. And yeah, we're excited to screen the movie and watch it in a room filled with film fans. And we're going to be pouring coffee for everybody.
Yeah, show them the coffee. Let's discuss this coffee here.
This is the Unknown Blend. It's a brand new release. We released it on Silent Movie Day, which was September 29th, which also happens to be National Coffee Day. So it's like a match made in heaven holiday. We created it to support the National Film Preservation Foundation and kind of highlight the Silent Movie Day goals, which is just to get more people to watch silent movies because silent film was the beginning of Joan's career. They're very underrated art form, as you all agree. And Joan actually starred in The Unknown alongside Lon Chaney, who is now just, of course, an icon. And Joan really wasn't as recognized for her silent work anymore. So we wanted to highlight that era that really launched her career. It's a mystery flavored dark roast to kind of play into the whole unknown aspect. But if you try it and you really drive yourself insane, you can always just ask me. I'll tell you, but I'll make you work for it. But we've really enjoyed the first few weeks of this one's release just because it's so fun watching everybody try it and just be so confused and go absolutely insane and to have a secret over there. Just kind of to taunt them with.
And I'm giving away both of these to Hollywood Kitchen viewers, by the way. So in the comments, tell me, Who is your favorite leading lady of classic Hollywood horror? Tell us who and tell us why. And I will pick a winner at random. We'll send a bag of coffee to.
Yay.
You know what's interesting to me, maybe you guys have some insight on this, is how some of the actresses that started in silence and later on when were even bigger in sound, like Joan, they kind of disowned their silent film. Like Marlene Dietrich said, I never made silence, only Gish and Garbo. Well, I go to the San Francisco Silent every year since 2001. She made silent films because I've seen one of them that Eddie Muller introduced at the Castro. So Marlene totally made silence, but she acted like that never ever happened. And there were quite a few that kind of downplayed or completely ignored that chapter of their careers. And I wonder if they thought it made them look older.
Yeah, I would think so. Or I think they're just so focused on their next project as well. Joan disowned, not disowned, but did not like most of her work.
Silence or talkies.
Yeah, one of my favorite roles of hers was Rain, and she hated her role in that film. She did not love it. But it's you can't really argue with the divas of the time. You let them have their opinions.
I have a theory though. I recently got the 4K, I think it's 4K, restoration DVD of Rain.
Mhm.
Oh my God, it looks gorgeous.
It's beautiful.
But here's the thing. The movie did not do well at the box office.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the fans, they didn't like, because Joan looked a little gargoyle-ish, if that's a word. But she has the huge lips and the really husky voice. And I think that a lot of fans were like, what on earth is
she trying to
this?
do?
What's she trying to do here?
But now we
And-
consider that campy.
Yeah.
Well, I just consider it who that character was. I
Yeah.
mean, she's a South Sea Islands prostitute.
Yeah,
She's not going to look like an elegant Park Avenue
No.
woman. That's just
Yeah.
not the thing.
she's not Pretty Woman.
No, so I understood what she was trying to do. And I think it's a terrific performance. And one thing I love about Joan gave 100,000%. She never phoned in a performance.
Mhm.
Like from the very beginning of her career all the way through like Trog. If Joan was on screen, she gave everything.
Absolutely.
So even in the bad films that she made, she still gave her all. And I've read that she really liked Lon Chaney on The Unknown because he taught her about acting.
Absolutely.
Like I think working with him was like a master class on how to be an actress.
She credits him a lot to how she ended up becoming such a dedicated actress. We have this postcard. I didn't think to bring it, but we have the quote of hers where she talks about Lon Chaney and how much she learned from him. And it was just one of the most notable, most impressionable experiences for her, which is another reason we chose The Unknown as the current film to highlight with our Joan line. Our entire purpose of the Joan line is to highlight what she cared about most, which was her career. She and Betty Davis had that in common.
They had a lot in common.
They
Really.
did. They were so similar.
Uh,
But so we try to highlight the different eras of her career, and this year was our throwback to the beginning. So it was a fun one. It's probably my favorite of the Joan releases that we've done. I just think it's such a specific look and a specific style. I mean, she was dressed in just the most fun bandanas and necklaces and chains.
and this was before she had the real Joan Crawford look that we know today. Angie, like, wasn't her makeup? She
Yeah.
had thinner lips, lighter eyebrow. I mean,
Look like Dancing Daughters too. Yeah.
She's a true flapper.
Yeah.
She was the example of a flapper.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly.
F. Scott Fitzgerald said as much.
That's right.
One thing I want to say that I think is so amazing about Lon Chaney, amongst many things, I think he is the most versatile actor in all of Hollywood history,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
But also,
Well, he's a man of 1,000 faces.
yeah, I've never heard a bad word about him behind the scenes,
Right.
or with women.
Right.
And I've read that when Loretta Young was very young, she was like 14 when she made, was it Laugh Clown Laugh?
Mhm.
Okay. That the director of that film would scream and yell at Loretta, she's a 14-year-old girl. And I read that whenever Lon was on set, he didn't do that to Loretta. So Lon figured this out, and he would be on set even if he wasn't in the shot, because he figured if I'm there, he's not going to mistreat Loretta. and Mary Philbin, Patsy Ruth Miller, who's co-starred with him in Hunchback. You've never heard any of those women say anything negative. In fact, they've said, "Oh, he was practically like a director. Oh, he was great to work with." Like
I
he's
think
just
too, because his background growing up with a deaf family, you know, he had to go so many obstacles to overcome, even just in family life, that you had to learn to really take care of people.
Absolutely.
I think that was that nurturing probably passed down to him to nurture everybody.
You're right, Angie. And his mom and dad were deaf
Yeah.
mute. So I think he learned sign language before he learned verbal
Mhm.
language.
Yes, I'm sure he was always an empath because, you have to, I mean, you feel terrible for your family, I'm sure, and having to take care of them, that passes on with everybody else you do.
He fascinates me. We have the same birthday, so I've always been like, oh, he's the coolest out of everybody.
And it seems this sad thing that he's the man of 1,000 faces. And then right when sound comes in, they're like the man of 1,000 voices. He does one
Yeah.
talkie and then he gets throat cancer and dies.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God. I mean, he was only 47 years old. And it makes you think like, what would film history have been like had he lived? And would Bela and Boris even have happened had Long lived and done some of those roles? Like you kind of wonder the what ifs.
Cheney Jr. did a good job seamlessly. Sometimes you get confused, Junior Cheney, because they did have that seamless transition at least, that you had kind of the son to step into that role a little bit.
I think a lot of those horror guys are very admirable just because compared to the glamour side of old
The
Hollywood,
diva side and
those men don't have as reputable
No.
track record. Boris Karloff, another stand-up gentleman.
Yeah.
We work with Sarah Karloff, and nobody's ever said a negative word about him.
Yeah.
He's just a true gentleman who loved gardening. He had a pet pig that he knitted sweaters for. Just like
That's awesome.
he loved his rose garden and his pig, and he was just truly just like, I don't know, the horror guys are the whole antithesis of horror.
Of what they were.
And then meanwhile the glamour guys
Right.
are like the nightmares. So it's definitely an interesting dichotomy, and I think the horror guys are more fascinating, quite honestly. Lon Chaney and Boris Karloff and Lugosi.
I think it takes a good empath to even play it, because I mean, you always fall in love with the monsters. You always end up feeling bad for them at the end. So you kind of have to have that personality that trans through the costume and the makeup to really
Absolutely. Everybody feels bad for Frankenstein's monster.
Exactly.
And Lon Chaney, like when you watch He Who Gets Slapped, you're just like, oh,
I
over and over and
always
over
feel bad
again.
I feel bad for the creature. I feel bad for all.
Well, I think what these men were able to do is transcend the monster to make them a human,
Right.
to give them a heart and a soul, and trying to get that across
Yeah, it takes
with
great
the
person.
eyes, with the body language, with layers and layers of makeup. I mean, it's kind of an astounding feat of acting. And you never, except for Frederick March and Jekyll and Hyde, you never see these kind of roles get Oscar nominations, get the critical acclaim. But to me, I think that would be every bit as hard.
They're the underdogs.
Yeah,
Quite
they
literally.
are.
Boris Karloff had back problems the rest of his life after having to carry the Bride of Frankenstein, Elsa, up those stairs, and it's very commonly known that he had problems for the rest of his life. He had like 20-something hour days.
I think
in
having
makeup
a timeless movie is more important than an Oscar. I mean,
I
can
agree.
you remember half the Oscar movies out there? Absolutely not.
No.
These movies that didn't, they're timeless.
At the end of the day, an Oscar is just a statue.
Right, exactly. Where these stories.
I think Sarah Karloff called it a doorstop or something.
Oh, she told me I
Liz
did.
Reiner used it as a doorstop.
Yeah. So
I did an interview with Sarah Karloff for Film Masters, and she told me this story, which I love, that Boris won a Grammy for spoken album for The Grinch.
Yeah.
yes.
And he didn't show up to get the Grammy. His agent wound up with it. And then he went to his agent's office, and the agent tried to give it to him, and he picked it up and goes, "Looks like a bloody doorstop."
Yeah.
And then put it in front of the door and walked out. And now Sarah has it.
Yes, I believe it's still in her house on a shelf in her living room. That's where I think I remember seeing it.
So it's like basically, yeah, can you tell me who won the Best Actor Oscar in 1951? Probably not. But do you know Frankenstein? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Sarah did confirm that Boris put brandy in his guacamole. So just you heard it here. He did that. So
Not just flour.
not just
Yeah.
flour. There was brandy in that guac.
Between
So-
he and Vincent Price, there were some horror men cooking up a storm. Like,
Right. And you know, another thing that was interesting, I got to meet Lynn Lugosi, Bela's granddaughter. And when I met her at Midsummer Scream, the horror convention, not this year, but the year before. And she told me she'd seen the Hollywood Kitchen episode I did. I almost burst into tears. I was standing there like trying not to like cry openly, and she told me that Bela's sister ran a Hungarian restaurant in Hollywood, and that Bela and his friends would go there and eat dinner together, and that he loved wine and cigars and really good food. And I'm
what
like,
do Hungarians eat?
that's an interesting topic. That's an interesting topic because I've actually covered this. I did the Bela Lugosi episode that I did. We did this cabbage wrap, right?
Okay.
But it called for insane amounts of beef and pork, and I don't eat tons of meat. So
Yeah.
David Skull, my friend, he kind of walked me through a more heart healthy way to make the dish. But basically, we used ground turkey. We wrapped it up in lettuce or cabbage leaves, and then we put a sauce over it with sauerkraut. It's very different.
I think it's probably Bulgarian, kind of similar to Bulgarian and German and Austrian type of foods.
Yeah, and we talked all about, and his background is partially Hungarian, so he was really able to shed some light on that topic. And then I did during lockdown, I did another episode on director Michael Curtiz, because I'm friends with Alan Rode, who wrote his biography. And Michael Curtiz was from Hungary. And we kind of used that when we made Vilma Banki's goulash. But we used it as a jumping off point to talk about Curtiz and all the Hungarian immigrants into Hollywood, because it's such a melting pot. And this was lockdown, and I didn't want to waste food. The recipe made so much goulash. I ate goulash for lunch and dinner every single day for like a week, and I have never eaten goulash since that time.
Yeah, you get that.
But there's a lot of Hungarian types of food, and I think that's a topic that I'm so fascinated by, is the cultural influence of a lot of these people and the food.
Hold on, there's a dog at the door.
Sorry, we got a pup at the door, so that's important stuff. Angie's going to help with that. But yeah, Hollywood is a melting pot because there are people from Germany and England and Hungary and really from all over the world that came to Hollywood that, you know, artistically contributed. Austria,
A
yeah.
lot of Audrey Hepburn came from. Yeah, you're getting everybody from everywhere. It's a very just traumatic time for the whole world when all these stars came over. It's very fascinating history and not very talked about. And that's another thing. I like the things that are less talked about, and that's kind of why I like bringing these stories back to life, because it tells a side of history that you don't learn in school. And to me, that's more important. I don't know. It's all equally important, I guess, but I just like the lesser talked about sides of history.
Yeah, I do too, because I feel like growing up, history was very white, male, powerful, focused.
Yeah.
And I feel kind of a tremendous frustration because I remember even as a kid thinking, well, that's cool and all, but what does this mean to me?
Yeah.
You know? And then in college, I saw a trio of films. I saw In Which We Serve, So Proudly We Hail, and The Best Years of Our Lives. And when I saw those three films, I was like, my God, this is what my life would have been like had Daddy gone off to war and my brother in the war and my mom's working in the factory. It made it for like a young girl, what would have happened if I had lived then. And also, we're both Southern. This past summer, I did a road trip through part of the South with one of my friends who's also Southern. And we stopped at a lot of historic plantation homes and took tours. And when I did a lot of that stuff in my childhood, it was always about the owners and the politicians and the powerful, wealthy men. These tours were all focused on women and on the enslaved people. And that was the narration, the recordings, all of it was that. And I felt so good I was like, my God, times have changed. Maybe we are looking at history in a different way because there's so many more sides to it than what we're often taught.
Yeah.
You know,
one of my favorite sort of like things to learn about is Eartha Kitt's story, where do you know, are you familiar with
some of it? Yeah, but tell me,
like,
remind us, tell the viewers.
She very late in her life did she get a birth certificate. She was born in this, I think her mom was a slave and she was sent off to live with an aunt or something who was abusive and just, I don't know, just and that wasn't long ago. It was very recent, and it blows my mind that it's in a lifetime span that this stuff could have happened. I don't know. It fascinates me.
Yeah, but I think history is very nuanced. It's very complicated. There are so many other voices and people and perspectives than we're ever often taught. So I think that's why it's fun to focus on not just the megastars, but also the minor and the obscure. And there's just so much to this rich tapestry that is history and that is Hollywood history.
Yeah. And I don't know. Everybody looks at all these stars and thinks, oh, they're the most glamorous people, but like behind the scenes, everybody's just one of those nerdy theater kids. So like I like it. They're like, I don't know, behind the scenes, they're these normal people who are just really interested in something, and then in public, they're come across as like the most cool people in the world, and it's just like, I don't know. Again, it's one of those yin and yang things. I just like that the whole behind the scenes they're one thing, and in front of the camera or in front of people, they're this big, larger than life thing. It interests me very much.
Well, Angie, have you noticed in studying old Hollywood, there's a disconnect between the public image and the private person?
Oh, 100%. And I learned that being a Mary Pickford historian, and really diving into, and like you said earlier, it's almost fascinating sometimes to learn more about them in their private lives than it is even on screen, because that's who they are, and what we see on the screen is just what their PR is telling us and then selling us. And you always have to you always preface the recipes. Was it theirs or was it a PR thing? And it is diving into who they really are. And I think, as women get older too, it's like, I think we still have to respect that they get older. And I find like Mary Pickford, especially being that she, once the curls came off, she kind of ended her career, but then that's when everybody kind of ended caring about her. Like then no one today talks about her later life, but that's just important to her story as it is today. Just because we age doesn't mean, there's no more to talk about or learn about.
I think one of the problems is our society is so youth driven that anything that's not youth driven is kind of relegated to being irrelevant. And I think I'm fascinated by Mary Pickford as well, because I feel like the level of trauma she had in such a short period of time. I mean, her mother died. Sound
Pretty much
came.
her whole family died within a year.
Yeah, Jack Pickford died. Her
Lonnie.
sister died. The marriage with Fairbanks fell apart.
Yeah.
She lost her career. I mean, that's like 5 or 6 traumas within like
A few
years time. And how do you bounce back from that? How do you,
You can't judge people for how they grieve, and you just gotta accept what they are now.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, Mary Pickford's still somebody who completely dominated the business side of Hollywood and trailblazed her way just up to the top, and she left her legacy behind the lens too. And I think that's more important than her work on camera.
Oh, absolutely.
And I just, she had some hard obstacles, and
but many of them did back then. It was a hard time.
Yeah, we definitely got it a little cushier now.
Yeah.
Even though we're all constantly going through historical events that never end.
Yeah.
Poor Florida.
There's a quote, "May you live in interesting times," and I'm all like,
no.
I actually prefer not to be honest.
I'd love one year where there's not one historical event to happen.
Basically. But for anybody watching, if you can find Leila Hyams films, and they are easy to find, Freaks is on DVD, Redheaded Woman is available, Island of Lost Souls is available. Is 13 Chair on DVD?
No, it's a good question.
I think it might be. It's Todd Browning.
It might be one of the unrestored where you get kind of like the low quality, but it might
check YouTube.
Yeah,
check YouTube also.
There's quite a few films of hers on YouTube. The $1,00000
yeah, it's probably never been restored, so
take
it with what you get kind of thing. Yeah,
but if you want to see it, there's your option.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think she's just a beautiful actress, an interesting person, and really well worth discovering.
Absolutely. She fascinates me, and she started in the silent era, just she only had a couple films in it, or maybe just one film in it. No, I think it was a couple. But she acted in her first film alongside Barbara Lamar, another lesser known icon that we now pay tribute to in coffee. And I just think she's interesting. All these silent era actors and actresses in particular are fascinating to me just because it's such a lost art. And so many of the films didn't survive all the fires and the natural disasters and the studios not caring about them. And more people need to discover, or else it will be a forever lost art. And that's not something we want to happen.
You know, I do want to mention one movie, if anyone's watching, I highly recommend. A few years ago at the Turner Classic Festival, opening night, every slot they give you like 7 or 8 choices, which is kind of impossible. But one year, instead of all the big offerings, I chose to see a little documentary on opening night called Dawson City Frozen in Time. Have you guys seen this? Oh my
I saw
God.
that the
No.
date or whatever that release.
It's kind of polarizing because I know some people that absolutely hate it and other people that love it. I'm in the love it camp.
Me
I don't know
too.
about you.
Yeah.
What's
do
it
too.
about?
Well, it's about, okay, so do you want to tell them what it's about?
It's up in Alaska, right? It's where the Dawson.
The Yukon, I
Yukon.
think. Yeah.
So basically, it was a very bustling town. Like Grauman and all them would go up there during the big gold rush. So during the gold rush, it was a very booming town. So it was a place where a lot of films would be shipped because there was enough people to watch theater up there. But the thing, it was such a pain to get the films up there. A lot of times even though distribution would be required to get these films right back, they're just like, whatever, take your time. Because they were getting the movies probably a couple years after the fact anyways. So even once we get to talkies, they're still just on the silent era of things. And then when once the town started dying off and they had all this film, they're like, what do we do with it? So like when the swimming center, when they had to close that, like they put all the film in the water and basically sealed that off. I think they were sealing off parts of the river, but to our advantage, it was frozen. So they were basically preserving a lot of these films.
Accidentally.
You might have some of the water damage, some of the moisture damages, but because it was frozen, like that's what kept that. It was all nitrate film. So they started basically like an archaeology dig and digging up a lot of these films, and some of them, I mean, they're very terrible to restore. You see some of the clips, you can see all the damage, but some of those films, that's the only ones that survived.
And most of the documentary is made by silent film clips they pulled out of the ground in the Yukon.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
And
never heard of this.
yeah, it's kind of, well, I think it came out for a week or two in main theaters in LA.
And that was probably like 7 years ago,
Oh,
8 years
Yeah, it was
ago.
many years ago.
Yeah.
This makes more
But-
sense now.
But it's one of those gems that it may have
It gives you hope.
yeah, because lost films do turn up.
Yeah.
I mean, just a month or two ago, Angie and I were in here with David Sten,
Yeah.
and they found the Pill Pounder, the Clara
Yeah.
Bow silent, at least most of it, in a parking lot in Omaha, Nebraska. So, and I've heard stories about Frozen in Time where some local kids would light the film on fire because little bits of film would stick up from the ground that had been buried in the ground. It's this crazy story about art and time.
But isn't that
and-
how The Unknown was found? Because that was lost for quite some time, and people kept passing the film because all that was written on there was unknown.
Yeah, it was.
So they assumed that nobody knew what the film was. But the whole time, it's like telling you this is The
Yeah,
Unknown.
It was in the Cinematheque Française, I think, and it was just labeled unknown, and they didn't.
So they just kept
Most-
ignoring it.
Yeah, most of these silent films are considered lost, and it makes you wonder what somebody has in their basement,
Yeah.
just sitting there, and
Exactly.
Check your attics. Check your basement.
especially here in LA.
Right? Well, I think this has been a wonderful discussion, ladies. Thank you so much. And I don't see any questions popping up here. So,
If anybody's wondering, that's Leila and Todd Browning from the 13th
oh yeah,
Chair.
show us the photos you brought.
This one is an original Ruth Harriet Louise MGM press photo of her.
Ooh, let me bring this around. By the way, tell us about Ruth Harriet Louise, Angie, because she's worth talking about as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, she was another woman, what's the word I'm looking for? Trailblazer, I guess, in the photography world. I mean, when you had all the the men photographers there, she was the one that really stood out. MGM put a lot, of faith in. She's kind of really one of the first big women photographers.
I think she was the only studio
Yeah.
portrait photographer to be a woman too
Yeah,
at that
so, I
time.
mean,
She did that great one of Joan Crawford with like the all black everywhere and it's just
Yeah.
her face.
The mask photo.
And they say that's one of the inspirations for the Evil Queen or something.
Yeah. Original Todd Browning signed clip, which you never see Todd Browning.
I'll take this to the front.
And he actually signed it to which one it is? I always forget. Can't read it, but it's one of the dolls. So when you watch Freaks and you have the doll family, the little people that's signed to one of them. That's just a cheating one, and then this is in very bad shape, but it is one of the original Freaks heralds.
Be very careful.
Yeah, I can't even open it up because but
Cool.
it's very interesting too that is, Olga was really the person that they highlighted. So like even I have a 3-sheet of the re-release of it, and it's her like front and center. Like there's so when I was mentioning the doll family, like there's one of the doll siblings right there.
Oh,
He was the
wow.
main character, but
Those are rare pieces of memorabilia.
Yeah, I've never seen
yeah,
those.
then you got the whole sideshow, all the different characters. Of course, you had the Hilton sisters, which I've always been fascinated. I have a lot of stuff regarding the Hilton sisters too. They're the Siamese twins in there, but all their lives are just so fascinating and important to tell. But
So cool.
Well, thank you, ladies, so much. This has been a wonderful discussion. I don't see any questions rolling in, but if you have them later, we'll all try to hop on and answer them. So thank you so much to Dominique, to Angie, Hollywood
get the
Heritage.
coffee to try it.
That's
Come
right.
to the museum tomorrow.
HollywoodHeritage.org.
If you're in LA, we got the bags for sale anytime.
Got the bags for sale. And again, leave the name of your favorite female horror figure and from Classic Hollywood in the comments and enter to win some coffee. So thank you, ladies, so much.
Thank you.
Please stay tuned for more food, fun, and film history from Hollywood Kitchen.